Life of Ma Parker is a short story by Katherine Mansfield. Set in London, England, through the focalized third-person narrator. The short story revolves around the hard life of Ma Parker, who has recently lost her grandson and suffers from emotional regression. Every Tuesday, an elderly woman named Ma Parker works as a maid in the home of a literary gentleman. When Ma Parker arrives at his house for her weekly cleaning, the man asks about her grandson as he opens the door. She sadly tells him that her grandson passed away the day before and we buried him yesterday, sir. The man, who was in the middle of his meal and dressed in a messy robe, is surprised by this news. He tries to offer his condolences by asking about the funeral, but Ma Parker doesn't respond and goes straight to the kitchen to start her work. The literary gentleman continues his breakfast, thinking that maybe Ma Parker has recuperated from the shock of losing her grandson. Ma Parker takes off her hat and jacket, puts on an apron, and struggles to remove her boots due to her stiff joints. Despite the pain, she is used to enduring such discomfort. She reminisces about her grandson asking her for a cent, and they would playfully bargain where he would declare that "I ain't got nothing." Then, she returns to her current task. The gentleman's kitchen is in a terrible state, with crumbs, envelopes, cigarette butts, and other things scattered all over. He considers his cleaning style to be simple and wonders why people fuss about housekeeping because you simply dirty everything you've got, get a hag in once a week to clean up. And the thing's done. Ma Parker doesn't hold any grudge against him and actually feels sorry that he has no one to take care of him. Ma Parker has had a tough life herself and knew that "I've had my share of sorrow." She left her hometown at 16, worked as a kitchen maid in a harsh environment, and faced hardships in her marriage. She raised 13 children, 7 of whom died young, and cared for her husband who died from consumption. Her life seemingly revolved around, if it wasn't the hospital it was the infirmary, you might say. Over the years, she had to raise her 6 children along with her sister-in-law as a single working-class parent while bottling her grief as she kept herself to herself. Her sister-in-law had come to help Ma Parker but severely injured her spine after falling down the stairs. Ma Parker had taken in her daughter, Ethel, and her grandson, Lenny, whom she affectionately called Grand's boy, after Ethel's husband passed away, who worked as a waiter. As she continues her work, the literary gentleman mentions her payment of half-crown was in the ink tray, and he asks about some cocoa from the previous week. Despite her initial response, he insists that he had left some cocoa in a tin. After he leaves for a stroll, Ma Parker thinks about Lenny's struggles with a chest infection, and her heart twinges in anguish. She leaves the gentleman's house, wanting to cry but can't find a private place to do so without being bothered. The rain starts, and she has no refuge to go to. Life of Ma Parker by Mansfield is considered a modernist short story. Modernism was an influential literary movement that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Characterized by a break from traditional storytelling and a focus on individual experiences and inner thoughts. In Life of Ma Parker, the story delves deeply into Ma Parker's thoughts and emotions through interior monologues, revealing her inner world. Mansfield takes the reader inside Ma Parker's mind, giving us access to her thoughts, memories, and feelings as they occur in real time. Modernist literature often employs fragmented narratives, where events are not presented in a linear, chronological order. Life of Ma Parker swings between Ma Parker's past, her present interactions with the literary gentleman, and her recollections of her family's history. Mansfield's choice to start the story with the opening of a door, an example of the modernist narrative technique known as medias res or mid-action. That plunges readers directly into the midst of the story's action, eschewing traditional linear storytelling. Modernist literature often focuses on the lives of ordinary individuals and their struggles. Mansfield explores the life of a working-class woman who faces hardships found in everyday life. This story contains glimpses of dual perspective of both Ma Parker's perspective and that of the literary gentleman. The short story ends with Ma Parker unable to find a place to cry in solitude, leaving the reader with a sense of ambiguity about her emotional state and her future. Mansfield's writing style in this story is distinct, using vivid imagery, flashbacks, shifting narrative and interior monologues to convey Ma Parker's precarious emotional state. The story portrays Ma Parker as a lonely, marginalized figure, and her struggle to find a place to cry reflects the alienation and disconnection often depicted in modernist works. Mansfield's choice of somewhat ambiguous names, Ma and Gentleman, emphasizes their stereotypical gender roles. The interactions between these two characters shed light on the class disparities in England during the early 20th century, as well as the prevalent gender stereotypes. Mansfield diverges from conventional portrayals by presenting the literary gentleman as a lazy and entitled bachelor who enjoys belittling women like Ma Parker, whom he deems beneath his social status. He derogatorily calls her a hag and exploits her need for employment by regularly making a mess in the house, only to have Ma Parker clean it up for payment. The constant reference to him as the literary gentleman accentuates the divide between them, especially since Ma Parker is illiterate. Also, Ma Parker's stereotypical role is limited to being a mother figure as she pities the gentleman because he lacks someone to care for his living space. Her maternal compassion and the fear of unemployment lead her to continue tending to the gentleman's house. Ma is a working-class woman grappling with grief, concealing her true emotions as a survival strategy in her difficult life. This pattern of emotional suppression traces back to her early days as a cook's maid in London, where she may have faced both physical and emotional abuse from the household cook. The death of Lenny shatters her patience, unleashing emotions she has bottled up for years, but she finds herself unable to cry, highlighting the enduring impact of her past traumas. Ma Parker's life has been marked by hardship, including the loss of her husband and 7 of her children. She supported a family of 6, including her late husband's sister. Despite being marginalized as a single working mother of low social standing, she perseveres. 2 of her daughters succumb to bad influences, her sons seek better opportunities elsewhere, and only Ethel, her youngest widowed daughter, and Lenny remained by her side. Therefore, Ma Parker had to put up a strong front for the sake of her family, which resulted in her suppressing her emotions. Ma Parker has evolved from the submissive domestic worker who used to go from one literary gentleman to another employer, struggling to support herself and her family. Her recent outburst of emotions, triggered by Lenny's tragic demise, has made her unable to hold back her tears, forcing her to leave the flat before completing her task. The thought of what might happen if the literary gentleman returns fills her with anxiety, as it could cost her the job and jeopardize future employment due to her inability to control her emotions. Mansfield, as Ma Parker rushes out onto the street in search of a place to grieve, stresses the character's nowhere-to-go predicament. She fears the police might intervene if they see her crying in public, and she cannot return home because she doesn't want to upset her daughter Ethel, who has never witnessed her mother's tears. The rain falling around Ma Parker, as she stands in the street, unable to cry, symbolizes her internal turmoil and the weight of her emotions. The story concludes ambiguously, a trademark of Mansfield's modernist narratives, leaving Ma Parker's fate unresolved. Like Lenny, whose resources were depleted, the story ends as abruptly as it began, leaving Ma Parker feeling trapped and unable to escape her emotional turmoil. As she walks home, Ma Parker realizes she can't be seen crying in public. As Mansfield suggests that crying at that time might not have been viewed as a natural part of the grieving process but rather a sign of mental distress, potentially leading to confinement in a psychiatric institution, as Ma Parker thinks if she broke down, if at last, after all these years, she were to cry, she'd find herself in the lockup as like as not.